Imagine a sweltering summer morning in 1518 on the narrow stone streets of ancient Strasbourg. The air seems deceptively calm, but an invisible and frightening shadow of an impending catastrophe already hangs over the city. An ordinary woman named Frau Trophia suddenly steps out of her cozy home onto the sun-baked cobblestones. She begins to move in a strange rhythm, as if obeying an inaudible and sinister melody inside her head. Her face expresses no joy, and her eyes are fixed on the emptiness of a spatial dimension invisible to others. Passers-by stop in surprise, believing this to be merely a fleeting clouding of the mind of a simple townswoman tired of hard work. However, her uncontrollable dance continues all day, frightening random spectators with its terrifying and unnatural monotony. The ensuing dark night brings no long-awaited peace, for the mysterious woman continues her frantic movements under the moon.
Imagine this chilling horror when a person physically cannot stop their own rhythmic step. Her shoes quickly wear down to dust, exposing battered feet, but an unknown force compels her to keep moving. Hundreds of townsfolk gather around her, mesmerized by this frightening display of an absolute loss of control over the body. They whisper quietly, trying to find at least some reasonable explanation for this strange and frightening solo performance. But none of them even suspects that this is only the very beginning of an impending massive urban nightmare. After a few exhausting days, 30 unremarkable people suddenly join her endless and frightening performance. They seem to become infected with this unknown scourge, abandoning their daily chores for an endless and eerie collective round dance. The crowd of the possessed grows rapidly, turning the cozy market square into a stage for the darkest spectacle of that era. By the end of a hot August, more than 400 townsfolk find themselves trapped in this inexplicable and terrifying phenomenon. People dance non-stop for days on end until their exhausted bodies finally refuse to obey the orders of an inflamed mind. Many fell heavily onto the hot stones, and their life force forever left these bodies tormented by constant movement. Hundreds of human fates were tragically cut short right before the eyes of the astounded crowd, who did not understand the true causes of this nightmare. This swift tragedy forever took away those who could never safely return home to their frightened families. The city authorities fall into a genuine panic, completely failing to understand the nature of what is happening on their native and familiar streets. Influential priests whisper fearfully about divine retribution, begging the strict heavens to forgive the sins of these unfortunate and lost souls. Respected local healers put forward a mistaken theory about overheated fluid inside the bodies, forcing people to move their limbs relentlessly. They claim that the sick simply need to release this excess energy through even more active and rapid movements. Following their rather strange advice, the city council makes an absolutely absurd decision that only multiplies the overall situation for the worse. They officially order the construction of huge wooden stages right in the center of the city to provide an outlet for this accumulated energy. The authorities even purposely hire professional musicians, sincerely hoping that live music will help the sick complete their strange ritual faster. But the loud drumming and piercing sounds of flutes only add fuel to this raging fire of mass insanity.
The rhythmic sounds attract more and more curious onlookers, who also unwittingly become prisoners of this consuming and merciless darkness. Just imagine this grandiose scale when hundreds of people relentlessly trample wooden platforms under the scorching summer sun. Their pale faces are distorted by grimaces of deep suffering, but an invisible and domineering force compels them to take ever new steps. They silently beg for mercy with their eyes alone, while their completely disobedient legs continue to beat out their frantic rhythm. Many townsfolk lost consciousness from extreme dehydration, departing into their final and infinitely eternal dark sleep. A grim and heavy shadow covered all of Strasbourg, turning a once prosperous European center into an abode of inexplicable and deep sorrow. Even the strongest men could not withstand such colossal physical strain, collapsing without strength after several days of continuous dancing.
Their hearts, exhausted by constant work, simply refused to beat any longer, unable to cope with such incredible and monstrous overwork. No one knew how to stop this rapidly expanding epidemic, which was consuming more and more innocent lives. Desperate officials decided to send the most severely ill dancers to the distant shrine of Saint Vitus, located high in the cool mountains. They were transported on creaky wooden carts, while the unfortunate ones continued to twitch in time with their inner destructive melody. Within the sacred walls of the temple, red shoes were put on their feet, and they were sprinkled with holy water in hopes of a miraculous healing. Some indeed found long-awaited peace there, but for many others, this journey became the final event of their lives.
The famous alchemist and physician Paracelsus personally visited this afflicted city a few years after the end of the great and terrible tragedy. He was the first prominent scientist who categorically refused to believe in the divine origin of this terrifying and destructive dancing epidemic. Paracelsus carefully interviewed the few surviving eyewitnesses, meticulously recording every minute detail of their strange and frightening behavior on the city streets. It was his detailed medical treatises that allowed modern researchers to recreate such an accurate and reliable picture of those distant and dark days. The doctor noted that many victims completely lacked any meaningful reaction to external stimuli and the loud cries of worried relatives. They seemed to be inside a dense, invisible bubble where only their personal, endless nightmare and infinite pulsating rhythm existed. Attempts to physically hold these people in place only led to incredible bouts of aggression and a terrifying, unnatural force of resistance.
Their muscles were tensed to the absolute limit, and their tendons stretched so tightly that they threatened to tear at any second. Some exhausted townsfolk tried to hide in the deep and dark cellars of their homes to escape this contagious rhythmic plague. But even in complete darkness and absolute silence, their bodies continued to twitch treacherously, obeying the orders of a poisoned and inflamed brain. Doctors of that time used the most radical and strange methods of treatment, including ice baths and strict multi-day fasting for the sick. However, these cruel and grueling procedures only further weakened the exhausted bodies of the unfortunate and frightened residents of Strasbourg. Eyewitnesses wrote in their personal diaries that only pathetic rags, soaked in street dirt and dust, remained of the dancers' shoes. As the crowd moved through the narrow stone streets, the monotonous hum of hundreds of footsteps echoed far beyond the high city fortress walls.
This sinister and hollow sound resembled the approach of a huge enemy army, but the enemy was deep inside these unfortunate people themselves. What made this situation particularly horrifying was that among the possessed dancers there were an incredible number of very young and defenseless children. Their small and fragile bodies could not withstand such colossal physical exertion for long, giving up much faster than grown men. Parents, in sheer desperation, tried to tear their children away from this mad vortex, but the crowd mercilessly dragged them back inside. The city treasury emptied rapidly as the council spent vast sums of gold coins to pay the musicians and build the stages. Officials sincerely believed they were doing a good and saving deed, but their actions only worsened the catastrophic situation of the city. When the first wooden platforms collapsed with a crash under the weight of hundreds of dancing bodies, a completely new wave of uncontrollable mass panic began. People watched in utter stupor at those who remained lying under the heavy oak boards, never having finished their dance.
Strasbourg, at the beginning of the 16th century, was a huge and prosperous trading center, where the paths of thousands of different merchants and artisans crossed daily. This majestic city was famous for its magnificent cathedrals and rich markets, attracting the attention of travelers from all corners of boundless Europe. But beneath this brilliant and beautiful wrapper hid a deep social abyss,
dividing the unimaginable wealth of the elite and the absolute poverty of the commoners. Ordinary workers huddled in cramped, dark, and damp hovels, where every day became a grueling test of the endurance of the human spirit. When that fateful year of 1518 arrived, the food supplies in the city granaries had dwindled to a critically dangerous minimum. The prices for ordinary grain skyrocketed to unthinkable heights, forcing the poor to feed on spoiled food and even dry tree bark. Under such unbearable conditions, Ergot became the very last drop that finally destroyed their fragile mental balance.
These specific hallucinations caused by this poisonous fungus often had a pronounced religious or terrifyingly mystical character for the uneducated people of that time. It seemed to many that the heavens literally tore open above their heads, spewing streams of blinding light and the deafening sounds of angelic trumpets. Others fought off invisible demonic entities with wild screams, which were supposedly trying to drag their souls into a deep, dark abyss. These frightening visions were so realistic and multidimensional that the infected person completely lost the ability to adequately perceive the surrounding reality. Even water seemed like burning acid to them, which is why many flatly refused to drink, rapidly bringing closer their inevitable and tragic end. Interestingly, the dancing plague had already visited European lands before, but it had never reached such frightening and catastrophic proportions. Previous local outbreaks quickly died down, leaving behind only eerie local legends passed in whispers from one generation to another. But it was in Strasbourg that all the unfavorable factors came together: a harsh climate, severe famine, toxic bread, and deep psychological despair.
This perfect and destructive storm forever inscribed the city's name into the pages of dark and mysterious medical anomalies throughout history. Only by the beginning of a cool autumn did this inexplicable bout of mass madness begin to gradually and very slowly fade away. The emptied city plunged into a heavy and ringing silence, mourning those whose life paths had been so suddenly and tragically cut short. This mysterious and dark page of European history remained a grim warning for a long time. Many centuries later, prominent historians and experienced doctors finally decided to definitively solve this dark mystery of the distant past. They painstakingly studied yellowed archival records, trying to find a strict logical explanation for this striking and frightening mass phenomenon. Modern scientists resolutely discarded mystical theories, focusing on strict scientific facts and a careful analysis of the climatic conditions of that time. It was then that a frightening and shocking truth came to light, hidden in the most mundane things of medieval urban life. The answer lay not in mystical curses, but in the endless wheat fields that tightly surrounded the city that distant spring. The spring of 1518 turned out to be incredibly rainy and damp, creating the perfect natural conditions for the birth of an impending catastrophe. Due to the high humidity, a tiny but incredibly dangerous and insidious black fungus began to multiply rapidly on the ears of ordinary rye. This dark biological scourge is called ergot, and it conceals highly potent chemical compounds that mercilessly destroy the human mind. Ordinary peasants, exhausted by a long and severe famine, harvested the infected crop, completely unaware of the threat hanging over them. They ground this poisonous black rye into flour, from which they then baked hot, filling, and aromatic bread. It was this very everyday product that became a real Trojan horse, silently infiltrating every home of the unsuspecting townsfolk.
Ergot contains dangerous alkaloids that are strikingly close in their chemical composition to the most potent modern psychotropic and hallucinogenic substances. Entering a weakened human body, this natural toxin causes severe vascular spasms and a profound clouding of a clear mind. The victims of such poisoning experience an unbearable burning sensation in their limbs, as if their arms and legs are engulfed in an invisible but scorching flame. The only instinctive way to somehow alleviate these monstrous physical sufferings was continuous and convulsive movement of their entire body. Every time you look at ordinary fresh rye bread, imagine what an incredible hidden threat it could have harbored back then. But severe physical pain was only a small part of that hopeless nightmare that suddenly befell the minds of the unfortunate residents of Strasbourg. Chemical toxins caused strikingly vivid and terrifying visions, completely erasing the fragile line between cruel reality and dark delirium. Infected people clearly saw non-existent monsters around them, plunging headlong into the abyss of their own distorted and sick consciousness.
Their tormented minds desperately tried to find a way out of this chemical captivity, forcing their bodies to move relentlessly under the scorching sun. However, toxic flour alone could hardly have provoked such a large-scale and prolonged mass hysteria of an entire city. Psychologists found that to trigger such a chain mechanism, another extremely important and mentally destructive factor was required. This powerful catalyst was the unbearable level of chronic stress in which the entire poor population of this European region constantly lived. Medieval Europe was an incredibly harsh place where every new dawn became a difficult struggle for one's own survival and sustenance. Frequent crop failures, harsh snowy winters, and constant outbreaks of dangerous diseases drove the collective human psyche to a state of absolute limit. People lived in a constant and sticky fear of impending starvation and the possible wrath of higher heavenly forces.
When the first dancing townsfolk appeared in this extremely tense atmosphere, the destructive effect of a massive psychological contagion instantly triggered. Deeply religious and highly frightened residents sincerely believed that this was a severe heavenly punishment for their numerous heavenly sins. Their minds, weakened by constant malnutrition, instantly succumbed to universal panic, forever erasing all possible boundaries of rational and adequate human thinking. A mass psychosis is always like a fierce forest fire. Just one small spark is enough for the raging flames to engulf the whole vast city. Imagine what it is like to suddenly find yourself there, among a crazed crowd, where everyone you meet shares one common, eerie, and frightening illusion. It was this fatal symbiosis of accidental chemical poisoning and deep mental despair that spawned that very fateful and endless urban dance.
In the 20th century, prominent toxicologists conducted a series of complex laboratory experiments to finally confirm this bold historical hypothesis. They carefully studied the effect of ergot derivatives on the central nervous system, obtaining completely unambiguous and scientifically sound results. It turned out that even a microscopic dose of this insidious substance is capable of causing severe muscle cramps and a long-term loss of touch with reality. Scientists also paid special attention to the fact that the epidemic raged predominantly among the poorest and most vulnerable segments of the urban population. Wealthy aristocrats ate expensive white bread made from pure wheat, so they remained practically unharmed by this mass psychosis. This social inequality became additional proof that the root of the problem lay precisely in the cheap rye flour infected with the fungus.
Today, strict sanitary standards and modern grain processing methods reliably protect us from a recurrence of such large-scale food catastrophes. Special chemical reagents instantly destroy any traces of the dangerous fungus, even at the early ripening stage of young wheat ears. However, the very memory of these terrible events forces us to treat the unpredictable and colossal power of living nature with great respect. We have learned to control the quality of our food, but the human mind still hides within itself many dark and uncharted depths. A new autumn harvest finally brought clean and safe wheat, and the toxic bread completely disappeared from the wooden dining tables of the townsfolk. The surviving people slowly came to their senses, looking back with genuine horror at the destructive and grim consequences they had endured. They learned to live in silence anew, trying to forever erase from their memories the sounds of those cursed flutes and obsessive drums.
This incredible story vividly demonstrates to us just how fragile and defenseless the human psyche can be in the face of blind nature.
It takes only a slight disruption of the usual chemical balance for the thin veneer of civilization to instantly dissolve into terrifying and primal chaos. Even today, our perfect brain remains an incredibly complex and vulnerable mechanism capable of presenting the most unexpected and frightening surprises. The history of medieval Strasbourg strictly teaches us never to underestimate the hidden power of invisible biological threats and crushing mass panic. Every time we encounter terrifying and inexplicable phenomena, we must look for answers in science, not in blind superstitions. Mysteries hidden deep in the shadows of centuries always find their logical explanation if the bright light of knowledge is shed upon them in time. Our vast world is full of incredible and breathtaking riddles that are just waiting in the wings to completely astound our imagination. If this deep dive into the dark secrets of the past made your heart beat faster, be sure to subscribe to this channel. Share your honest thoughts in the comments. What would you have done if you had found yourself on those sun-baked streets of the distant and frightening past? Hit the notification bell so you never miss our new investigations into the most thrilling and mysterious phenomena of all humanity. Ahead of us lies a huge multitude of amazing discoveries capable of forever overturning your usual perception of this incredible surrounding world.